In my 35 years on the bench in Providence, I've seen fear, pride, shame, and hope walk into my courtroom wearing every kind of face. If this touches your heart, leave a comment, because what happened that morning still lives with me. I thought I was about to hear a routine case, one more file in a stack that never seems to get smaller. But then a 12-year-old boy looked up at me with eyes far too old for his age and said, "It was me, Judge. My sister didn't do it." And just like that, the whole room changed. I remember the light that morning. It came through the high courtroom windows in that pale Providence way, like the city itself hadn't quite decided whether it wanted to be gloomy or kind. Inspector Quinn was at his post. The clerk was moving files. The prosecutor had that look attorneys get when they believe they know exactly how the next 10 minutes are going to go, and then they called the case. A young woman stepped forward first. 19, maybe 20, at most. She was standing so straight it told me immediately she was holding herself together by force. You learn to see these things after a while. The strong ones, the ones everybody leans on, they don't slump. They lock their knees and hold their breath. Next to her stood a skinny boy in an oversized gray sweatshirt and sneakers so worn at the toes I could see where the fabric had given up. Behind them on the second bench sat a little girl with 2 braids, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear bent backward. A court officer had found her a juice box. She was trying not to sip it too fast. I looked down at the complaint: property damage, theft of food items, municipal restitution hearing, community recreation center, night entry during a citywide power outage, defendant Marisol Vega. Now let me ask you something. In a courtroom like mine, when you see a file like that, what do you expect? A reckless teenager? A bad decision? A story that begins with "it wasn't me" and ends with "someone else made me do it"? I've heard all of it. I've heard every excuse God ever allowed to be invented. But the minute I looked at that young woman, I thought, this is not going to be simple. I asked her name. She said it quietly: "Marisol Vega, Your Honor." Her voice was respectful, but there was something else in it. Fatigue, not the kind that comes from staying out too late, the kind that comes from carrying more life than one person should have to carry. I said, "Ms. Vega, I'm looking at a complaint that says you broke into a locked snack cabinet at the Admiral Street Community Center during the blackout in January, causing damage to city property and taking milk, crackers, and juice. Is that correct?" She swallowed. "That's what the complaint says, Your Honor." I looked over my glasses. "That's not what I asked." She nodded once. "Yes, sir." Now, I've been doing this for 35 years, and when someone says yes that way, you know they're not admitting guilt. They're surrendering to it. There's a difference. One is confession, the other is exhaustion. The prosecutor stood and started summarizing the facts. Security footage, damaged side door, a metal latch bent with a tire iron or similar object, food items missing from storage, one witness, partial identification. Defendant later appeared at the police station and accepted full responsibility. I asked, "Did she have a record?" The prosecutor said, "No prior record, Your Honor." I asked, "Was any money taken?" "No, Your Honor." "Any electronics, equipment?" "No, sir. Only the food items listed." "What was the total value?" He glanced down. $23.16 in food. Damage estimate for the latch and door frame, $480. I leaned back. $23.16. You can spend more than that on lunch without thinking. But in a courtroom, sometimes $23 tells you more about a person than $23,000 ever could. Before I go further, subscribe to see more stories from my courtroom, because the cases people laugh off as small are often the ones that teach us the biggest lessons. The law may measure damage in dollars, but a judge has to measure people in something deeper. I turned back to Marisol. "You came to the station yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." "They didn't arrest you first?" "No, sir." "You turned yourself in?" "Yes." I paused. "Why?" She hesitated, and I mean really hesitated, not the hesitation of someone inventing a lie, the hesitation of someone standing at the edge of a cliff deciding whether to jump. Then the boy beside her suddenly grabbed her sleeve. She looked down at him, and I saw it. Panic. Not fear for herself. Fear that he was about to do something she had spent weeks trying to prevent. And then he did. He raised his hand as if he were in school, even though no one had asked him anything, and he said, "Judge, she's lying. It was me." You could feel the air leave the room. The clerk stopped writing. The prosecutor lowered his file. Inspector Quinn glanced at me, and I glanced at him, and that was one of those looks that doesn't need words. It said, "Here we go." I said very gently, What's your name, son? Gabriel. How old are you, Gabriel? 12. What are you doing here today? He looked at his sister. She closed her eyes. Then he looked back at me. I came to tell the truth. I've heard that sentence from adults who never had any intention of telling it, but when that little boy said it, his voice shook so hard it nearly cracked in half. And I knew right then, whatever this case looked like on paper, the real story was only beginning. I said, "All right, slow down, take your time." He nodded, but his chin was trembling. "My sister didn't break in." "I did." I used the tire iron from downstairs. I made the door open. She just came after. Marisol whispered, "Gabriel, stop." He didn't stop, and that told me everything. Children who are lying will look at the adults before they speak. Children who are telling the truth will speak because they can't live with not speaking anymore. This boy wasn't performing. He was drowning, and the truth was the only thing floating. I said, "Why did you do it?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He tried again. "Because Lucia was shaking." I looked toward the little girl with the rabbit. She looked back at me and then at the floor. I said, "Who's Lucia?" He pointed without turning. "My sister." "How old is she?" "She's 7. "And what do you mean she was shaking?" His answer came out in pieces. "She gets sick if she doesn't eat right, and she needed juice and crackers, and Mommy was at work. The lights were out. The store on the corner was closed. Everybody was closed." Now my attention sharpened. I looked at Marisol. "Does your sister have a medical condition?" She nodded slowly. "Answer me." "Yes, Your Honor, type 1 diabetes. There are moments on the bench when the file in front of you disappears. The charge doesn't disappear, the facts don't disappear, but the paper stops being the story. The story becomes the people." I asked the prosecutor, "Was that in the report?" He looked annoyed. "There is a reference to a younger sibling not feeling well, Your Honor, but there were no medical records attached at the time." I turned back to Marisol. "So let me understand this. During the blackout, your younger sister had a diabetic episode. She was getting pale, Your Honor. She was sweating. She said her legs felt funny. We were out of juice, out of test strips, out of almost everything. And your mother, working overnight at the nursing home. Your father." That question hung there. Marisol looked straight ahead. "Not with us." I did not press. Sometimes absence has enough weight without details. Gabriel blurted out, "My sister told me not to do it. She said wait. She said she'd figure it out. But Lucia was crying and then she got quiet, and that scared me more." I could hear the strain in his voice. He was trying so hard to sound brave that it broke my heart. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, because what I heard next forced me to ask not only what the law required, but what humanity demanded. And in a courtroom, those two things don't always arrive holding hands. I asked, "Where was this recreation center in relation to your home?" "Half a block," Marisol said, "across the lot." "You knew there was food there?" She nodded. "Now, did they hand it out after the scalfon, sometimes milk, snacks, fruit cups, and so you went there?" Gabriel shook his head fast. "No, Judge, I went there. She didn't. She was with Lucia." Marisol said, "I found him there." I looked from one to the other. "Now, what am I going to do with you?" That thought went through my mind, but not in the joking way people know from television. I mean it the way a father means it when he sees two children trying to save each other and getting crushed in the process. I asked Gabriel, "Did you take the food?" "Yes, sir." "How much?" 2 milks, 3 juice boxes, crackers, and peanut butter crackers. The prosecutor corrected him. "There were also protein bars." Gabriel nodded without looking over. "Yes, sir." I asked, "And your sister came after that?" He said, "Yes." Marisol spoke softly. "When I got there, the door was already bent. He was trying to carry too much. Lucia was in the hallway wrapped in a blanket. I told him to go home. And then I took the food and went home." "And later you confessed?" "Yes." "Why?" Her eyes filled, but she refused to let the tears fall. "Because he's 12. There it was. No speech, no performance, no appeal to pity, because he's 12. Let me tell you something, my friends. Sometimes one sentence reveals the soul of a person. That one did. This young woman had looked at her own future and then looked at her brother's, and she decided hers was the one the system could have. I sat back and let the silence do its work. I thought of my father. My father came to this country from Italy with little more than determination and dignity. He worked hard every day of his life. He sold fruit. He washed dishes. He did what he had to do to keep the family afloat. My mother stretched every dollar like it was made of rubber. We didn't have much, but we had love, discipline, and this understanding that family wasn't a slogan. It was an obligation. It was sacred. When I looked at Marisol and Gabriel, I saw that same fierce instinct. Protect the family. Carry what you can. Don't complain. Don't let the little ones suffer if you can prevent it. But instinct does not erase law, and law does not erase context. That is the balance judges live inside. I asked Marisol, "Do you have medical documentation for your sister?" She nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I brought everything." She reached into a worn plastic folder. The corners were bent. Papers were organized with rubber bands, medical forms, prescription labels, a utility shut-off notice, pay stubs, school attendance notes, a letter from a nurse practitioner. She had come prepared not to excuse herself, but to prove she had been desperate. That always matters to me. People who are manipulating the system bring emotion. People who are telling the truth bring paper. I handed the documents down. "Let me see those." While the clerk brought them up, I watched Gabriel. He was staring at the floor, but his body was angled slightly toward Lucia, even from across the courtroom. Children who parent other children do that without realizing it. Their ears stay turned toward trouble. I looked through the records. Type 1 diabetes, diagnosed at age 5. Episodes of hypoglycemia. Recommendation: keep juice or glucose tablets accessible at all times. I saw the date of the outage. I saw the nurse's note. I saw the mother's overnight shifts. I saw past due notices like bruises on paper, and my heart sank, because the more I read, the less this looked like delinquency, and the more it looked like a family cornered by poverty. Now, before I tell you what I found in those papers, leave a comment if you've ever seen an older sibling become a second parent too soon. People talk about heroes as if they only wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear hand-me-down jackets and stand in court trying not to cry. I asked, "Ms. Vega, how long have you been caring for your brother and sister while your mother works nights?" And that T answers, "And I don't know end." "About 2 years, Your Honor." "Every night?" "Most nights. You go to school?" "I did. I had to stop senior year. I'm working on my GED now." "What kind of work do you do?" "Cleaning rooms at a motel in Warwick 3 mornings a week. And I do hair in the neighborhood for cash sometimes." "And your mother?" "2 jobs." I said, "How old are you?" 19. 19. At 19, most kids are worried about social plans, classes, maybe their first heartbreak. This young woman was tracking insulin, utility payments, school, lunches, and whether her little sister might pass out in the dark. I said to Gabriel, "When you went to that building, what were you thinking?" He answered so honestly it stung. "I was thinking if Lucia got really sick and I didn't do anything, it would be my fault." There are answers you expect from children, and then there are answers that expose the burden they've been carrying. That was one of them. I asked, "Did you know breaking in was wrong?" "Yes, sir." "Then why did you do it anyway?" He looked at me like I had asked him why he ran into the rain to pull someone from a ditch. "Because she needed it." Simple, not polished, not legal, not clever. Because she needed it. The prosecutor shifted, and I could tell he was uneasy, not unkind, just uneasy, because the law likes clear categories, and this case refused to stay inside one. I asked him, "What is the city seeking today?" He cleared his throat. "Restitution for the property damage and a finding on the complaint, Your Honor." "Against whom?" He hesitated. That was important, because up until that moment, the system had been prepared to proceed against the sister alone. The boy's admission complicated everything, not legally alone, morally. "Against Ms. Vega," he said. I nodded slowly. "Even though the boy has just stated under oath that he caused the damage?" "He is a minor, Your Honor. The complaint was filed as to the defendant based on her admission." I said, "Admission made to protect him, apparently." He said carefully, "That appears possible, yes. Possible." I've always loved the language of law and distrusted it at the same time. Lawyers say possible when everyone in the room knows something deeper has been revealed, but no one wants to step on the bridge first. So I stepped. I looked at Marisol. "When you went to the station, did you tell them your brother did it?" "No, Your Honor." "Why not?" Her answer came fast this time. "Because they would have put him in the system." "Did anyone threaten that?" "No, sir, but I know how things go." That one hurt, because even when people misunderstand the court, they often understand fear perfectly. I said, Who told you that?" "No one. Life." Inspector Quinn lowered his head just a little, the way he does when something human and painful lands in the room. "I have great affection for that man. He has seen every kind of behavior, every kind of heartbreak, and he still knows how to look at people as people. I turned a page in the medical packet and saw a note from the clinic. The child had missed a follow-up because transportation failed during winter weather. Another note said food insecurity was discussed with the family. Food insecurity. There's a phrase bureaucracies use when they want to describe hunger without sounding emotional, but I've been around long enough to know what it means. It means a child is calculating portions. It means a mother's lying that she already ate. It means an older sister's counting juice boxes while the lights are out. And then something in the paperwork stopped me. A receipt stapled to the back. Cash payment to the city clerk's office, $100. I looked up. What is this? Marisol blinked. I've been paying when I can. For this case? Yes, Your Honor. I asked the clerk to verify. Sure enough, she had made 4 separate small payments over 2 months. $20, $30, $15, $35, from motel work and hair money, no doubt. Do you understand what that told me? It told me she wasn't running from responsibility. She was walking toward it one exhausted dollar at a time. If this story is moving you, share it with someone who still believes compassion has no place in justice. I'm here to tell you the opposite is true. Compassion is what keeps justice from becoming machinery. I asked Marisol, did you skip paying anything else to make those payments? She looked down. That meant yes. I asked again, more softly. Did you? She nodded. What did you skip? Just things. That's not an answer. She took a breath. My GED test fee, bus fare sometimes. I stretched food. We managed. Gabriel blurted out, she stopped eating breakfast. That courtroom got quiet in a way I can still hear. Children do not usually betray sacrifice unless they are angry about it. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry at the pain she'd hidden from him. Marisol whispered, Gabriel, but he was done protecting the secret. She said she wasn't hungry, but she was. She gives Lucia the last stuff, and me too. I had to pause for a moment. Not because judges aren't supposed to feel. Judges are allowed to feel. We're just not allowed to let feeling blind us. There's a difference. I needed that pause to make sure what came next would be guided by wisdom, not impulse. I said, Ms. Vega, look at me. She did. You were willing to take a municipal finding, a record, restitution, all of it, to keep your brother from carrying this. Yes, Your Honor. And you've been paying it back even though the act itself was not yours. Yes. Why? Her answer nearly broke me. Because somebody had to be the adult. That line went straight through me because somebody had to be the adult. At 19, I looked over to Lucia. She was watching her sister now, not understanding every word, but understanding enough. Children always do. I asked the prosecutor for a moment. Then I did something I often do when the law gives me room and conscience tells me to use it. I started asking questions no one had thought to ask before. What time did the outage begin? He checked the report. Approximately 8:40 p.m., Your Honor. When was the entry? About 9:12. So 32 minutes later. Yes. How long after the defendant's mother left for work? Marisol answered that one. About an hour. And did you attempt to call 911? She looked ashamed. No, Your Honor. Why not? Because Lucia was still talking, and I thought if I called an ambulance we'd get a bill we couldn't pay, and maybe they'd say I should have had supplies in the house. We were already behind. That was the twist, not the break-in, not even the confession. The twist was that fear had made them choose between medical help and financial ruin. That's the kind of choice no family should ever face, and yet too many do. Before I tell you what went through my mind in that moment, subscribe if you believe small courtrooms can still hold big truths. People think these are minor cases, but I'm telling you the soul of a city is often revealed in what happens over $23.16. Now let me ask you something. What would you do if you were me? A young woman committed no direct damage but lied to authorities and accepted guilt. A 12-year-old admitted he committed the act but did so out of desperation tied to a medical emergency. A child with diabetes sat in the gallery holding a stuffed rabbit while the system debated a broken latch. The city had a right to protect its property. The family had a right to survive. That's not a law school exam. That's real life. And real life is messy. I looked at Inspector Quinn. He gave me a tiny shrug, but his face said plenty. He has children. He knew. I looked at the prosecutor. He wasn't hard. He was thinking. Good prosecutors do think. They're not there just to win. They're there to uphold fairness. I've seen many with good hearts in my courtroom. I said, Counselor, did anyone from the Recreation Center provide a statement? Yes, Your Honor. The director submitted an incident report. Do we have it? The clerk handed it up. I read it. Inventory unsecured due outage. Side maintenance door not fully deadbolted because staff had been moving supplies earlier that day. Food stored for after-school program. Damage discovered next morning. Missing items consistent with emergency removal rather than bulk theft. I read that line twice. Emergency removal, not looting, not greed. Emergency. I asked, who wrote this? Center Director Melissa Dunn, the prosecutor answered. Is she present? He looked back. She is, Your Honor. A woman rose from the second row. Mid-40s, sensible coat, face drawn with concern. She stepped forward. I said, Ms. Dunn, did you write this report? Yes, Your Honor. You used the phrase emergency removal rather than bulk theft. Why? She glanced at Marisol and Gabriel. Because that's what it looked like to me. Whoever took the items took only things a child could use immediately. Juice, milk, crackers. Nothing else in the room was touched. Not the cash box, not the electronics cabinet, not the game room. That mattered. A lot. I asked, when did you learn it was this family? About a week later. Marisol came in asking if she could clean the building after hours to pay for the damage. I told her it had already been reported. Now we were getting somewhere. You offered labor to make it right? Marisol nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Did you tell Ms. Dunn your brother had done it? No, sir. Why not? I didn't want anyone looking at him like he was a criminal. There it was again, that ferocious instinct. Ms. Dunn added, for what it's worth, Your Honor, Gabriel has come to that center for years. He helps stack chairs. He carries sports bins for the staff. He's a good kid. Good kid. Sometimes that phrase gets used too casually, but from someone who has seen a child over time, it means something. I asked Gabriel, is this der stak tabor? For so are sa, kedesi there's a nines, there's a knife for giant the days. Why? Because they let Lucia color in the art room when Mom is late. Do you see how every answer widened the picture? Nothing in this family operated on selfishness. Everything was about keeping the little one safe. I thought again of my father. He used to say in his own way that dignity isn't what you own. It's how you carry hardship without letting it poison your character. This family had hardship, all right, but character? It was all over them. I've said many times in my courtroom that I try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated if I were standing where they are. That's not softness. That's civilization. The law tells me what happened. The eyes tell me why. A good judge must be able to read both. I leaned forward. Gabriel, when your sister told you not to do it, did you understand her? Yes, sir. And you did it anyway? Yes. So you disobeyed her. A tiny flicker crossed the room. Even Inspector Quinn almost smiled. And sometimes truth opens the door for a little humor. Gabriel lowered his head. Yes, sir, I said. What am I going to do with you? You look like a kid whose trouble and conscience all mixed together. So a few people laughed softly, including Lucia, who didn't know why, but needed the relief. Then I got serious again. Did you intend to steal from the city? He frowned, thinking hard. I intended to get the juice. That may be one of the most honest answers I have ever heard in a courtroom. I asked Ms. Dunn, would the center have given them food, had they asked? Absolutely, Your Honor, if we had been open. But you were dark, yes, and the family had no way of knowing staff would return. That's correct. I looked at the prosecutor. Any evidence of vandalism beyond the forced entry? No, Your Honor. Any evidence the defendant or this boy tried to sell, hide, or profit from the items? Allegation of gang involvement, prior similar incidents, or broader criminal conduct? No, sir. Just a frightened family, just a medical scare, just a desperate act. And now the state wanted me to do what exactly? Stamp this young woman with guilt because she loved too much. Drag the boy into juvenile consequences because he panicked over his sister's blood sugar. Tell the little girl in the gallery that the people who came to court to protect her were going to pay for years? No. But I also could not say breaking in was acceptable. That's the burden of judging. Mercy without principle becomes chaos. Principle without mercy becomes cruelty. You have to find the narrow bridge in between. If you're still with me, leave a comment and tell me whether you think intention matters as much as action. In my courtroom, I've learned this. Mercy is not weakness. It's strength with a memory. It remembers that human beings are more than their worst 5 minutes. I asked the clerk, "How much remains on the restitution balance?" She gave me the number. $380, Your Honor. I looked at Marisol. "How long have you been trying to pay this?" 10 weeks. "How much do you earn at the motel?" "Depends on hours. Maybe 160, 180 a week. And you're paying this while supporting your family?" "Yes." I rubbed my chin. Then I did something that surprised even me. I asked Lucia, "Young lady, would you come here for a second with your rabbit?" The officers helped her approach. She came up carefully, her shoes blinking faintly with lights that had almost worn out. She stood by the podium and looked at me with that solemn child face that says, "I'm trying to be brave because everybody else is." I softened my voice. "What's your rabbit's name?" "Rosie." "Rosie's very nice. Did your brother and sister help you the night you were sick?" She nodded. "Were you scared?" "A taputai down. Nouns and downs, downs." "Did they stay with you?" "Yes." I said, "That's what I thought." Then I looked back at everyone else and said words I meant with all my heart. A courtroom should never be the first place a hungry or frightened kill. Sure, nine child gets and duck and dentu duck and da or datu datu dab and datu dabas. You could feel that land. The prosecutor looked down. Ms. Dunn dabbed at her eyes. Inspector Quinn stood perfectly still. I continued, "This family needed help before they needed me." Now, before I tell you the ruling, hit subscribe if you want more stories from my courtroom where justice and humanity meet face to face, because this next moment is the one people would later talk about all over the country, and I want you to hear it the way it happened. I took a deep breath. "Ms. Vega, stand beside your brother." She did. "Gabriel, look at me." He lifted his chin. "What you did was wrong. Do you understand that?" "Yes, sir." "Breaking into property that doesn't belong to you is wrong, even when you are scared." "Yes, Judge, but let me ask you something. If that little girl had been in real danger and you believed no one was coming, were you trying to be cruel?" "No, sir." "Were you trying to save your sister?" "Yes, sir." I nodded. "I believe you." I turned to Marisol. "And you? You lied to protect him. That was wrong too." "Yes, Your Honor. But you also stepped in front of a moving train for your family. You took responsibility, you came forward, you made payments you could not afford, and you did it because you thought that was the only shield you could give your brother." Her face crumpled then, just a little. I said, "I believe you too." Then I addressed the room. "I have been doing this for 35 years, and I want everybody listening to understand something. There is a difference between criminal character and desperate conduct. If the law cannot recognize that difference, then the law loses the respect of the people it serves." I let that sit for a second. This court finds that the conduct at issue arose from an immediate family emergency involving a medically vulnerable child, that the defendant's confession was made to protect a minor rather than evade responsibility, that restitution has already been voluntarily undertaken in good faith, and that the interests of justice do not require a punitive finding here. Now people expect drama in a verdict, but the real shock is often in the restraint. I said very clearly, "The complaint against Marisol Vega is dismissed." The room inhaled all at once. Marisol covered her mouth. Gabriel looked at her before he looked at me, as if he couldn't believe freedom until he saw it on her face. But I wasn't done. "As to restitution," I said, "the court is terminating any remaining financial obligation owed by this family in this matter." The prosecutor looked up. The clerk froze for half a second. Marisol stammered, "Your Honor, I can keep paying." I raised my hand. "No, you've paid enough, in dollars and in sacrifice." Then I turned to Ms. Dunn. "Director, if the recreation center is agreeable, I would like this matter resolved through community restoration, not punishment, not court-ordered labor, not humiliation. I want Gabriel and Marisol invited back when appropriate to help at one after-school program day this month, voluntarily supervised and as welcome participants, not offenders." Ms. Dunn nodded immediately. "Absolutely, Your Honor." I said, "Good." Then I looked at Gabriel. "You're not going back there as a thief. You're going back there as a helper. Do you understand the difference?" His voice cracked. "Yes, sir." "The difference is one takes out of fear, the other gives back with dignity." He nodded harder, and then came the moment that later people called the shocking part. I looked to the clerk and said, "The $100 already paid by Ms. Vega is to be refunded to her family." Marisol nearly collapsed. "No, Your Honor, please." I lifted my hand again. And if there is any administrative issue with processing that refund promptly, the balance will be covered privately. This family will not leave this courtroom owing the city another penny. Now I don't do things for applause. God knows if I wanted applause, there are easier places to stand than a municipal bench. But that room reacted the way people react when they witness mercy they did not expect to survive inside a government building. A gasp, then silence, then tears. I saw people in the gallery wiping their eyes. Even the prosecutor, to his credit, nodded. He understood. Inspector Quinn gave me that look again, the one that says, "You did what had to be done." But again, I was not finished. I leaned forward. "Gabriel, come closer." He did. "You listen to me. You are not a bad boy. You made a bad decision under pressure. Those are not the same thing. Don't you ever confuse them." He stared at me. "Do you hear me?" "Yes, sir." "Good, because when a child decides he has to become a burglar to keep his sister alive, the adults around him have already failed him. I'm not talking about your mother or your sister. I'm talking about the world that let your family get that cornered." No one moved. I continued, softer now. "Your job from this day forward is not to rescue everybody by yourself. Your job is to stay in school, tell the truth sooner, and let the adults worthy of the title help you." He started crying. Then, not loud, not dramatic, just the kind of crying children do when they finally realize they are not about to be crushed. I handed him a tissue from the bench. "Take that. Don't make me come down there and wipe your face myself." The courtroom laughed through tears. I turned to Marisol. "And you're a good person. I want you to hear that from me. Not perfect. Nobody is, but good." She was openly crying now. "Thank you, Your Honor." "No. Thank you for loving those children. But don't confuse martyrdom with strength. Strength sometimes means asking for help before the walls close in." She nodded, barely able to speak. I asked the clerk to provide the family with contact information for local food support, emergency medical supply assistance, and a community legal advocate who could help them with benefits. I asked Ms. Dunn whether the center could reconnect the children to its program. She said yes before I finished the sentence. That is how justice should work when it's awake. Share this if you know someone who needs hope, because I'm telling you now, a courtroom can punish, yes, but it can also redirect a life. And sometimes the most powerful verdict is the one that restores dignity where shame expected to live. The family stepped back from the podium, but Gabriel turned once more before walking away. "Judge? Yes? Are you sure?" What a question. He wasn't asking about law. He was asking about worth, about whether mercy was real, about whether grown-ups sometimes mean the good thing they say. I answered the only way I could. "I'm sure. But don't make me regret it." He gave me the first true smile of the morning. Lucia held up Rosie the rabbit as if even the rabbit had been acquitted, and for a moment the whole courtroom breathed easier. Now you might think that's the end of the story. Case dismissed, tears shed, everyone goes home. That would be enough for television maybe. But life is always longer than the clip. And what happened after that day is why I still talk about this case. Because a verdict is never only about what happens in court. It's about what people do with mercy once they receive it. The video from that hearing, as people later told me, spread farther than anyone expected. I've been fortunate, through Caught in Providence, to see moments from my courtroom travel all over the world. Sometimes people watch for humor, sometimes they watch for surprise, but the reason the show matters, at least to me, is that it reminds people the bench doesn't have to be made of ice. And this case touched a nerve. Letters came in. Emails came in, teachers wrote, nurses wrote, older siblings wrote. People said, "That was me," or "I was that child," or "I wish someone had seen my family that way." I read as many as I could. One letter from a woman in Ohio said she had stolen formula at 14 because her mother was unconscious from pills and her baby brother was screaming. She wrote, "No one asked me why, they only asked me if I did it." That letter stayed with me, because that is the whole lesson, isn't it? The law must ask if you did it. Justice must also ask why. Not to erase responsibility, to understand it. A few weeks after the hearing, Inspector Quinn came into chambers with one of those half smiles that means he knows he's carrying news I'm going to want. He said, "Judge, remember the Vega family?" I said, "Of course I remember them." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of lined notebook paper, the kind with torn edges from a school binder. The handwriting was large and careful. Dear Judge Caprio, thank you for not making my sister be the bad guy for me. I know what I did was wrong. I am trying to do things right now. Lucia says Rosie likes you. I am helping at the center on Thursdays. I stack chairs and wipe tables. Ms. Dunn said I'm good with little kids. I got a B in math and an A in science. My sister is taking her GED test next month. My mom cried when we got home, but in a good way. God bless you. From Gabriel. I'll tell you the truth. My throat tightened reading that. If people think judges become numb, some do maybe. I never wanted to. If I lose the ability to be moved by decency, then I have no business sitting where I sit. Before I tell you what happened when they came back to see me, leave a comment if you've ever been changed by one act of kindness you didn't expect. The smallest mercy, given at the right moment, can alter the direction of a whole family. Months passed. Court kept moving, as it always does. Parking tickets, red light cases, license suspensions, all the ordinary parade of municipal trouble. Some folks came in defensive, some came in funny, some came in broken. That's the rhythm of a courtroom. You never know what the next file will contain, and that uncertainty keeps you humble. Now and then, in between cases, I'd think about Gabriel. I'd picture that old gray sweatshirt and those honest eyes. I'd wonder whether he was sleeping easier, whether Marisol had finally eaten breakfast without pretending otherwise, whether Lucia's glucose tabs were stocked in the kitchen. Then one afternoon, not long before the holidays, the clerk said, "Your Honor, there's a family here asking if they can say hello." I knew before I looked up. They were standing at the back, cleaner clothes this time, not fancy, just lighter somehow, less burden on their faces. Lucia had a new rabbit, not new exactly, but newly washed. Gabriel had a collared shirt on, too big in the neck. Marisol was holding an envelope and smiling the careful smile of someone who still can't quite trust good news to stay. I waved them forward. "What are you doing back here?" I asked. "You miss me that much?" Gabriel grinned. "A little." "A little? That's all I get after all I did for you?" Even Marisol laughed at that. I said, "Come on, tell me." Marisol handed the envelope to the clerk. Inside was her GED completion certificate and an acceptance letter for a medical assistant training program. I looked up at her. "You passed." She nodded, tears already forming. "Yes, Your Honor." I said, "Beautiful. God bless you." Gabriel had brought his report card, not just an A in science anymore, honor roll, and a note from Ms. Dunn that said he had become a reliable volunteer with younger children in the center's snack line. He was the first one to remind staff when juice was running low. I looked at him. "Still trying to save everybody?" He gave me a shy smile. "Not by breaking stuff." "Well, that's progress." Lucia, who had grown bolder, reached into her backpack and pulled out a crayon drawing. It was a courtroom, me on the bench, Inspector Quinn standing like a giant, her sister, her brother, Rosie the rabbit, and above all of us, a bright yellow sun that had absolutely no relation to Rhode Island weather. I held it up. "Now this is a masterpiece." She whispered, "That's you saying God bless you." I looked closely. Sure enough, there was a speech bubble that nearly finished me. I asked their mother, who had come with them this time, how she was doing. She looked tired in the way working mothers do, but there was relief in it now. She told me another shift had opened at the nursing home with more stable hours. The clinic had connected Lucia to a better support program. Ms. Dunn had helped with a pantry referral. Things were not perfect. Life is almost never perfect, but they were breathing again. That matters. I have learned over the years that judges cannot save everybody. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling fantasy. A courtroom is not a church, not a hospital, not a social service agency, not a miracle factory. We are bound by law, by procedure, by limits. And thank God for limits, because power without limits becomes dangerous very quickly. But within those limits, there is still room for decency. There is room to ask one more question. There is room to notice who has worn shoes and who has polished ones. There's room to understand that paying a fine and paying a price are not always the same thing. There's room to say, "I see you." And let me tell you something, my friends. Being seen can be the beginning of redemption. People often ask me why I talk to defendants the way I do, why I joke with them sometimes, why I ask about their families, why I say, "Take care of yourself," or "You're a good person," when some would prefer a cold bench. My answer is simple. Because I know what struggle looks like. Because I know what it means for a family to piece together a life with hard work and faith, because I remember where I came from, because my parents taught me that dignity belongs to everyone, not just the successful, not just the polished, not just the people who know how to speak in legal language, and because I have seen over and over again that shame hardens people, while respect sometimes opens them. That does not mean everyone gets a pass. No, I have fined people. I have held people accountable. I have looked right at someone and said, you knew better, and now you're going to pay the consequence. Justice requires that too. Love without boundaries is not love. It's neglect dressed up as kindness. But this was not that case. This was a case about instinct, sacrifice, fear, and truth. It was a case about a boy whose conscience would not let his sister carry his burden. It was a case about a young woman who tried to stand between her brother and the system. It was a case about a little girl whose medical condition turned one bad night into a moral test for everybody around her. And it was a case about whether a judge could look at all of that and still remember that the purpose of law is to serve humanity, not humiliate it. If this reminds you of someone in your own life, share it with them. Tell them this from me. Your worst moment is not always your final definition. A good society leaves room for people to come back from fear. There's one more thing I want to tell you. Not long after that family visited, I was sitting quietly after court, and I found myself thinking about health, time, and gratitude. When you live long enough, when you go through your own battles and come out the other side with a deeper appreciation for breath itself, you start to understand that the real measure of a day is not how much power you exercised, but how much good you made possible. I am grateful for every day I get. Grateful for the bench. Grateful for the chance to meet people where they are. Grateful that even now, after all these years, I can still be surprised by courage in unlikely packages. A 12-year-old boy in worn sneakers, a 19-year-old sister with the spine of a soldier, a child with a stuffed rabbit, a courtroom in Providence, and a reminder that justice and mercy are not enemies. They are partners when we have the wisdom to introduce them. Sometimes people online say, Judge Caprio restored my faith in the system. I appreciate that, but I always think the real credit belongs elsewhere too. It belongs to the people who tell the truth, even when truth costs them. It belongs to community workers like Ms. Dunn. It belongs to staff like Inspector Quinn, who never forget that each case file holds a life. It belongs to mothers working double shifts. It belongs to siblings who grow up too fast and still choose love. A judge alone cannot create justice. A community has to want it, and that is why this case shocked so many people, not because I waved a magic wand, not because the verdict was flashy. It shocked people because mercy has become so rare in public life that when it appears it feels revolutionary, but it shouldn't. Mercy should not be shocking. Mercy should be recognizable. Mercy should feel like a society remembering itself. Before I close, tell me what you would have done if you were sitting in my chair. Would you have punished the act, excused the motive, split the difference, or searched for another path altogether? I always like hearing from people who are willing to think past the surface. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe to see more from my courtroom. There are more moments like this, moments that remind us that behind every citation, every complaint, every frightened face at the podium, there may be a story bigger than the charge. I still keep Lucia's drawing. Not on the bench, of course. Judges have to maintain some dignity, but I keep it where I can see it once in a while. In the drawing, the sun is shining over everyone. The court officer looks 10 feet tall. The rabbit is smiling. And I am saying what I have said 1,000 times and hope to say 1,000 more before I'm done. God bless you. Take care of yourself. And never forget this: the strongest people are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes they are the children who tell the truth through tears, the sisters who carry more than anyone sees, and the families who walk into court terrified and walk out remembered. That morning in Providence began as a case about a broken latch and $23 worth of food. It ended as something else entirely. It ended as a lesson that truth can arrive in a child's shaking voice, a lesson that responsibility can wear a teenager's face, a lesson that the law works best when it is guided by conscience, and a lesson that I carry with me still. When people are trapped between survival and obedience, our duty is not only to judge what they did, but to ask, what kind of world forced the choice? That is what I saw that day. That is why I ruled the way I did. And that is why, even after all these years, I still believe a courtroom can be a place where people do more than answer charges. It can be a place where they are given back their future. God bless that family. God bless the people who helped them after. God bless every older sibling trying to be a parent before their time. And God bless you, my friends, for listening. Because if enough of us keep listening to the stories behind the struggle, maybe mercy won't shock the nation next time. Maybe it will simply look like justice.